We're here, we're queer, and we will continue to change the world. Welcome to Queer Changemakers. I'm your host, Justin Mezzatine, pronouns he, him, and each episode will share stories of LGBTQ plus individuals who are taking action to make a difference in our communities and beyond. Welcome to another episode of Queer Changemakers. Today, our guest is Chris Wood. Would you like to give a brief introduction to what you're up to these days?
Yeah. So my name is Chris Wood. I'm the executive director and co-founder of LGBT Tech, a national and slightly international nonprofit working at the intersection of the LGBTQ community and technology. It's been a dear passion of mine for a while. Actually, just tech in general has been a passion of mine, and adopting new technologies as well as just understanding how they work. So it's been quite a journey. Been running it for about 14 years now, and it's grown from an organization of just me to an organization of about 9 or 10 individuals across the country, really representing many parts of the LGBTQ community, both in geography, but also just different parts of the LGBTQ community. And it has been a journey for sure. Starting anything of that size or with that much scope comes with its challenges and lessons, but it has been one that I wouldn't change for the world. It's been amazing.
Awesome, awesome. I didn't realize you were also the co-founder of LGBT Tech. So, can you share more about the beginning of that journey? So,
Yeah.
I guess what you were doing before, and then what helped you start this?
I think it's not going to go too far back, but I think it's important to kind of talk about my background because it's unusual. I'm actually a military brat. So both parents were military, both parents were Army. My dad worked on nuclear weapons, and my mom was part of the military police corps. So very strict household, very rigid household, all while having undiagnosed ADHD. I grew up with ADHD. I drove my parents absolutely crazy and bonkers. My mom used to always talk about the trail of like clothes I would take off coming to my home in New Mexico from the time I entered the door all the way down the hallway. And that continued to until my husband broke me of that in our young 20s. But in reality, that I was very curious about all kinds of things. I just had a very curious mind. And of course, when we're at that age, we don't recognize what that is or that curiosity or what our interests are as clearly as we do looking backwards. And one thing I can say is that I'm a tinkerer. I like to understand how things work. I want to know why they work. And something I've really been learning more about is systems, the way systems work. And systems are in all kinds of things. They're systems that are very visible, but then there's systems that are not visible. I'm not just talking about some of the bad societal systems that we have to deal with as the LGBTQ community, but also the systems in our own brains, the systems in our relationships. And so that's been a huge piece for me in understanding how to get to this point within this organization that I really wasn't aware of. I'm graduated high school. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. Well, I wanted to go to the military, but I came out my senior year of high school, and being gay in the military at that point in time was not allowed. It's also when the Iraq War was happening. My mom was controlling the supply lines into Iraq and knew that they weren't armored. They weren't taking care of their troops. And she had this deep passion for, she was an officer, but she would go toe to toe with anybody to protect her NCOs or enlisted members of the military. And I just remember the stories about her just advocating and getting so upset with some of the leadership there about how the fact that they weren't protected. Ultimately, she told me she would turn me in for being gay, which kept me out, or it was her duty. What she later disclosed to me was that she knew they weren't armored and she knew what was going on, and she really had a hard time with the idea of losing her son to that. And so this kind of talks about the foundation of relationship because military family coming out as gay, not easy. Definitely spent some time outside the house. I ran away. I left because when I came out, it was not a good situation. So I bring that up as far as my path and journey because there were a couple pieces that played into there. One is I had a flip phone, not the like iPhones. iPhones weren't out then, but I had a flip phone that you could play like Snake on. And when I left the house and was kicked out and left, I would say, where that it was a mutual agreement. That cell phone was so crucial for me to be able to survive as a senior in high school, stay with friends, find a couch to sleep on. It was the first time I had been independent with a close eye. I was also the battalion commander for my JROTC unit at that point in time, so I had a good supportive network. But kind of looking back and recognizing that there were these key pivotal moments that really shaped kind of the way I saw the world, the world that I grew up in, the world I lived in, and would inform the work going forward through LGBT tech and other stuff that I've done. I bring all that up to really underscore because I think for so many LGBTQ individuals, as we've initiated these programs and had the awesome opportunity to meet so many LGBTQ youth across the country, sometimes seeing your path is so hard. It's so difficult and it's so unexpected, or you're just not sure where to go. It's frustrating. And I bring all that up because I want people, especially LGBTQ individuals, to recognize that their journey is part of the adventure. Their journey is part of what makes them who they are and provides the pathway to a better future, to embark, to encourage them to get into a better future, to invest in themselves, to learn and educate. Like I said, I took a non-traditional path. I went to some college, but it really didn't feel like it was for me. I was an entrepreneur at heart. By that point, by 18, I had formed several little businesses. By the time I was 20, I had formed small businesses that were consulting for places like the Washington Blade as their marketing department, as well as other small businesses in and around Washington, D.C. Eventually, those panned out into I started working at the Washington Blade, and I was the marketing manager there for many years. And that was my opportunity to work within the community, work within the LGBTQ community. And although it was marketing and sales, and that was one perspective that I had, I started to learn and really dig into more of the community and more of the history of the community. I was a baby gay. So more importantly, I think important to recognize is I was a baby, like middle class gay white boy. And I think that's really important to recognize because that comes with a whole lot of privilege. And that's a whole lot of privilege that I didn't realize that I had growing up in that space, even though, yeah, sure, I had my story, I had conflict with my parents, all that stuff. But there was so much about the community that I didn't know because we're not taught it growing up. We're not taught this is the queer history and these are the people that fought for your rights and stood up to police and oppression. And so I had a lot to learn. And working at the Blade was a really big piece of that for me because it really made me look at the whole community and really look at what was happening. So that was extremely informative for me and really, I think, fundamental to what we've built today. I was there for a while. I ended up going into broadcast television. I've done finance. I've like run finances for bars. I've been a bartender. For broadcast television, I went to Discovery Communications. I was hired into the marketing department. And this particular piece was interesting to me because it fueled my curiosity. One, because I'm sure you're familiar with the show How Things Are Made, was obsessed with it. And I just talking about that curiosity, which is why I started at that very beginning. That curiosity has always been there. I've always wanted to know how things work, why they work, why people do things. This particular piece in the marketing department allowed me to understand people. And I think that was really interesting for me. So, getting the community experience at the Blade was amazing. Getting to Discovery, specifically TLC, started to learn about what made people tick, what were groups or segments of people, having access to large data sets like LexisNexis and being able to see the way people were categorized and what large data sets looked like, to sit behind large screens in Silver Spring and watch people talk about shows that weren't out yet and their reactions and what was happening in the room around me and what people were taking from what people were saying. It was all so informative for me because it really helped me understand the perspective of what other people saw in other people, in other communities, in the other segments. And that was really powerful for me. At the time, I didn't realize it. I was just working late nights. But looking back, I just realized how much that informed. And it really did fuel the starting of LGBT tech. Now there was a catalyst, and we'll get there for in a minute because it's a big catalyst. But I think it's so important to recognize that the other piece there was that I was tying multi-million dollar campaigns into social media campaigns. Social media was just coming online. You had things like Living Social and Groupon. I was traveling with talent, so like Monty Durham, Randy Finoli from Say Yes to the Dress, and Monty Durham from Say Yes to the Dress. I was traveling with them to do shows across the country, but I was involving community members. So I was giving away tickets to these events and stuff, and that was really eye-opening for me. I did them at Pride events. I also did them at show recordings. That was really informative to me because I recognized that there was so much of this country in different places, meaning different places where they were economically, different places of where they were socially, where they how they understood the world around them. And that really showed me that we have to meet people where they are. When I went into different communities, reaching them on Living Social wasn't always an option. If we were in the middle of somewhere that wasn't very populated, Living Social wasn't a big thing at that time. And so I recognized at that point that meeting communities where they are is extremely important and informs the work. And it can be where some organizations can fail because they're trying to achieve a goal, but they're not doing it with the community in mind. So I know that was a long answer, but it really for me is important to explain that story because it doesn't get told a lot. It's not something that I tell a lot. And I want people to recognize, especially within our community, regardless of where they are, what their background is, that those dots do connect and they have really big impact on every single day. So when you think you're spinning your wheels, you're probably not. You're probably learning a lesson. You're probably trying to find out what's next, but that moment, that lesson in the moment is extremely important.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, that's it's we haven't even gotten to LGBT tech yet, which is cool. But it's, the journey. The journey is what matters. So from curiosity to having to, how do I say it best? What's the most empowering way to say it? Leaving home, standing up for yourself and putting yourself in a hard situation because it was true. Um,
Mhm.
I think that's a key lesson and it's interesting. So like curiosity to having that integrity to go out and sort of figure it out yourself. And then even being at the Blade, which is that the oldest gay publication?
Mhm. It is the oldest gay public paper of record. So Kevin Naff is, I believe, still the editor, as well as Lynn Brown is the publisher, and several people I used to work with are still there, and actually new friends are there that have been there for quite some time. So,
Yeah. So that and then marketing with discovery and just traveling. Yeah. So it's like see these different aspects of, as you said first, that foundation of curiosity, and then there's being involved in community, seeing the marketing in and of itself, which is about how to talk to people and ask them to how to figure out what people need and hopefully give it to them if you're doing it right. Um, yeah, and then just traveling around and meeting community.
hey,
So all of this leads is the beginning, your foundational work.
it
Um,
is.
yeah. So then,
It is. So then starting this, and the reason I held this was because it is quite a big piece of this. So about 9 months into my employment at Discovery Communications up in Silver Spring, Maryland, September 1st, 2010, I returned from lunch and I walked into the lobby to find myself staring down the barrel of a gun in the hand of a suicide bomber that had taken three hostages, one of them being me, in the lobby of the Discovery headquarters in Silver Spring. And that was a lot. That really forced a lot of perspective for me, as anyone could imagine. But I think, people ask a lot of questions about that in different ways. And I think one of the most pivotal things that I continue to say is there's intention and purpose and what are you going to do with your life? And those all come afterwards. But in the moment, I was saying goodbye to everybody that I possibly could. I was texting on that floor when I could, saying goodbye to anybody that texted me without really being able to say goodbye to anybody. Wasn't talking to my parents. My parents didn't know. My loved ones didn't know necessarily. There were some people that knew because they worked in the building and they were friends of mine. But for 4 hours, I closed my life and said goodbye to everything without saying goodbye to anyone really. Um, that was towards the end of that situation. I won't, I can talk about that at extensive length. I won't go too much into that, but I think the important part of that and the poignant part is that I got to a point after being laid on the ground and stood up, laid on the ground and stood up. I got to a point where I was like, I've just got to get out of here. Like, no matter what happens to me, if I can get out of here and survive, then I will be better off than just staying here. And so I initiated the run to get the hostages out and coordinating, communicating with the hostages and doing a countdown under my arm where the other hostages could see it. Risky, bold, potentially very dangerous. In my mind, it was if we can get as far away from this individual as possible and out, even if the device goes off or even if a bullet flies there, at least maybe we have a chance of surviving. And so that really led me to the next point of my life. I continued working for Discovery Communications from LA for a little while, but that's where I really started pulling apart this onion and looking at the things that were important to me. My curiosity bug was back in a big way, and really understanding the layers of the onion to the LGBTQ community and what it meant to be LGBTQ, what it meant that they would have to go through in society as it stood at that point, what access they had, what tools they used, where they went, what they did, who they met with, all of those things really started to pull together for me. And technology was a core piece of that. I recognized all the way back to, again, this is why I went through that story, is that when I left my house, I had a flip phone. And it was so crucial for me to be able to really empower myself. And I recognized that technology played a crucial role. Yet, LGBTQ communities, individuals, and voices were not at the tables where these conversations were happening. So, the National Broadband Plan, written by the FCC, had all kinds of diversity, has had it since the 1970s, represented by Black groups, Asian Pacific Islander groups, Hispanic groups, all kinds of people with disabilities, but never LGBTQ. And so we really took that and ran with it as an idea of including LGBTQ individuals in the technology conversations because they hadn't been up to that point. And trust me, the first few years, it was what's gay about technology? I don't understand why this mattered. And it had to do with a lot of education. Actually, in fact, it had to do with a lot of research first, to understand how it was different. And we found several key things in that initial research that LGBTQ individuals were adopting technology at 50% faster than their heterosexual counterparts because it allowed them to gain access to information, to community, to health information, etc. We knew that in particular lesbians who were self-diagnosing using the internet, and we all know how that goes. If you go to any of those websites, it can be pretty scary, but they didn't feel comfortable talking to their doctor about it. And so there's a lot of these little research facts that we started uncovering, and why we've continued and really I built the foundation of the organization around research, because recognizing that everything we did and any position we took had to be grounded in research to be substantiated, had to be grounded in research. And also because we know historically what has happened. You go back to World War II and Nazi Germany. The first books that were burned were out of the Transgender Institute in Berlin. And that's huge amounts of data that were lost for our community and parts of our community that are now being just persecuted on so many levels, even in spaces where they may have been safe before. And so that research and that foundation to the organization is so important to me and so crucial to make sure that we continue that and that we preserve it and we continue those efforts to today. So that was, in kind of forming this, we started small. We started with small events. We started with the research, and then we ended up growing it. And it's really three pillars here. So we have a think tank, which works on research and policy advocacy, and those kind of sit together. But then we also have our programmatic arm. And that was really born out of through the research, we realized actually Dr. Rice out of UCLA wrote a piece about the fact that LGBTQ individuals who were dealing with housing insecurity were pulling themselves up their bootstraps of devices. And not all those devices had, cell service. Sometimes they were just Wi-Fi service where they would sit outside of a Starbucks. But how that empowered portions of our community to change their trajectory. And that really resonated with me, from my own experience, but also so many that I had heard around the country. And I realized that in addition to research and advocacy, that we could be building programs that were groundbreaking, that were doing something different. It's not easy. It's not easy to build programs to get funding for things where people aren't doing it traditionally. And the very young me decided that that was okay and we were going to do it no matter what. And what drove me and fueled me is that as we did it, we got to meet with individuals who were facing these exact circumstances. We are coming face to face with those individuals. And that really sits with me heavy from my own experiences, but meeting individuals, I take all of that to heart. I'm an information gatherer. I listen very deeply. I never forget. I don't forget a lot. And I use that to inform a lot of our work. And that continuous fuel of individuals talking about the impact of technology, how they've used technology, really drove the expansion of some of these programs like Power On, which is distributes technology to LGBTQ centers and individuals through two grant programs. Our PADS program, which really drives and empowers LGBTQ individuals into STEAM. This is an important one. This was under Obama. We were holding tech summits, LGBTQ tech summits at the White House. And I was hearing from a lot of recruiters that they were looking for diversity. But what I noticed was that they were looking for a magic wand that was going to fix it overnight. And what we had was a systemic problem, a long term problem. And it had to do with LGBTQ individuals, especially LGBTQ individuals facing multiple marginalizations, not seeing themselves in positions of technology, not seeing themselves in positions of power. And so it was important to get those stories out of people who look very different, that are the spectrum of the LGBTQ community, to come in front of the camera and tell their story about how they got into it, because that is going to empower people to say, "Oh, I can do that. I can absolutely do that, or I'm interested in that. Maybe I should talk to them." And so that program is really born out of that. And then our digital navigator program, providing resources and providing information like cybersecurity tips and educational components to make sure that our community is educated as possible, recognizing, again, back to what I said, we have to meet community where they are, and not everybody is in the same place. And that's okay. They don't have to be, and we should never hold someone back because of that. So that core fundamental is how do we meet people where we are, and has informed the work up to this point.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that. You said something about being an information gatherer. I see that as I see myself doing that as well. Just trying to like figure out what is going on with different people, like what is this about? And that's one of the reasons I started the podcast, to be like, hey, you're doing some cool things. Here's one way I can learn about it and share that learning with other people as well. So trying to think of what's my follow-up question. So, in that story, you mentioned a few different programs that you're running. You also have a think tank wing that also does research. Let's see. So, three different questions that are similar but different. So, it's 2025. It's been a long year, even though it's not even halfway done yet. And when we look back to where the state of technology is with social media and those effects, AI and those effects and possibilities, and also just the big tech industry, let's say. There's a lot of people who may not have the most hope for the future, the hope of technology. And I guess right now, what are your thoughts on the state of tech and our community as LGBTQ plus people? That
It's certainly hard and it can be overwhelming for sure. I want to acknowledge that there has been changes on social media platforms to the way LGBTQ communities and other minority communities are supported through some of these spaces. The attack on DEI and in creating these spaces, it's really an effort to drive our community and diverse communities back into the proverbial closet or back to be hidden. And I hate to bring this up, but I think it's important that we do as leaders and community members is we've seen this before. We know what happens. Like when people are erased, when data is erased, when data collection doesn't happen, it is a lot easier to erase a community and pretend they don't exist. And I think that's extremely important for people to realize because right now I know that there is a lot of fear. There's a ton of fear about speaking up too much, especially for our immigrant community, our LGBTQ immigrant community, completely understand why they want to be so quiet and so careful, and they should absolutely. But for those of us that have the ability to be louder and more boisterous and, without putting our lives in jeopardy, hopefully, knock on wood, I'm going to say that with a grain of salt. We need to be using that voice because we need to make sure that family, communities, society, leaders, politicians all know that we are still here, we still exist, we've always been here, and we're not going anywhere. And I think it's also important to realize in the tech industry, we have a huge number of LGBTQ individuals in that space. There are multiple organizations that work around getting hired in tech as LGBTQ individuals. So it's important to recognize that there's a huge number of us in those fields who are advocating on the inside of these companies and organizations. Sure, from the outside, it may look like things aren't happening, it may look like things are slipping backwards, but I can tell you from experience and conversations that that is in fact not the case. People are advocating heavily inside these companies, inside these platforms. And if they're not getting met there, you see people leave and go to, either create their own or go to companies that are. I think a really good example, because you mentioned AI, I think a really good example of this is kind of as society and those working in these spaces, society, we really try to self-govern in a lot of ways. I know it's not always perfect. I'm not saying that this is the way that we should model it, but look at OpenAI. OpenAI started as a nonprofit, it started growing, and then you had things like Anthropic or Claude come out from teams that came from OpenAI. So that's a pure example of where just because something isn't happening within a company or an organization that we want to see as a community, sometimes what happens is a group of people band together and move outside to create a better model, one that is, Claude is run by a constitutional AI. It has a set of principles and theories that are not built into other AI. I bring that up because I don't think a lot of people recognize the difference. All these different platforms are built on different, in different ways and different things, but it's important to recognize that these individuals, especially from our community or our allies, are advocating the best they can in our current path. Do I think this is going to maintain in this way for economic reasons? I think people are really getting tired of it. I also think on top of that, the impacts on different marginalized communities, including the LGBTQ community, are definitely weighing into the way people are thinking, even if they don't identify with our community. There's one more piece that I want to say, which is, and it goes to data. There's a lot of fear right now about using AI, about being counted in data sets, and a lot of those are legitimate. But I do want to just challenge that for a moment in the fact that if data is not collected, if we don't have information out there about the community, then it's hard to be counted, it's hard to be included, it's hard to make sure that we're not reinforcing bias, misinformation, disinformation about our community, especially those that are part of multiple marginalized communities. And so it is a double-edged sword. It is, we want to be counted, but we want to be safe. And this keeps me up at night. And I read a lot on this and try to understand. We have to figure out a better balance. And I think it exists within industry. Industry sees the importance of protecting sensitive information. I'm not saying all industry, but a lot of industry, like my Claude example, there are companies and organizations out there that are really working in this space. And if we aren't collecting data and providing data to those sources, then we're doing our community a disservice of being included in this stuff and potential erasure of our community, especially those that are our most marginalized, our non-binary, our trans youth. And I think it could be extremely detrimental to our community.
I like that. And one thing that you did bring up that I didn't think about before is the path that certain technologies have come from. So people who were at OpenAI left to go do things at Claude to
To
make
start, Claude.
start Claude to make it better than the things they were doing at OpenAI. Because I do think that right now there's so much going on and so many people throwing this new tool and this new technology, these AI agent makers or these other people or whatever. But I guess doing that next step of being like, okay, who's actually involved in this? Do they have a code of ethics or do they have something that they're actually principles that they are attempting to go by? Because I feel like I've not heard that mentioned often. I
Yeah.
think I have conversations about what's ethical AI or like how do we do this, but I haven't really seen, okay, here's what OpenAI's ethics, and here's someone else's ethics. And being able to sort of not combine, compare the two to see, oh, this people are also talking about this other part that wasn't mentioned in the first. I think that could be really interesting so that we can be better informed users and know like, okay, it's not just, oh, this model has better reasoning or something else, but this one has better or maybe slightly worse, but it also is going to be more better in terms of privacy and ethics and all that good stuff. So that's
And limiting harm. This is a huge passion project for me, and I've been doing it for the last 2 years or so, is educating nonprofits on AI. And so more generally, not just LGBTQ. And that passion is going to continue for me because it's nonprofits who have the ability to gain the most from it. Sure, corporations can gain money and shareholders and all of that. Nonprofits can gain streamlining processes, can gain, the ability to execute and meet the community where they are in a way that, in a way they haven't been able to before with less resources. There's a whole host of benefits that are there. I'm not saying it's not without its challenges. I don't want anybody to misconstrue my words. There are challenges and there are considerations you need to be very careful about what data is being used, how it's being used, what you're plugging in, all of that, how it's training and informing models, or is it not, making sure it's not to a certain degree in many cases. So, we all use AI. I will tell you right now, I confirm every single time that data non-utilization is turned on, that if a system is trying to use my data or information or my words, I don't allow it or I don't use it. But this is a really big passion of mine that impacts the LGBTQ community, but I recognize it has a much broader impact than just our community.
yeah. And I think that's one of the things I love about diversity is sometimes by looking at a super specific community and solving for that need, you realize that you also just solve needs for other communities and other places. And it's like, oh, we made something better for them, but actually it made it better for all of us. I think is one of the good things about technology and people. Okay, so I've got two more questions in this vein, and it's about technology. So I guess one, what is something you would like to see in technology that's not here yet? Like a little, like maybe even a magic wand. Like I wish technology would be more wow.
Wow.
And
So there's one that I'm very interested in that also just scares me, and that is quantum computing. I mean, it's here-ish and it's locked down tight. But when I'm saying quantum computing, I'm saying quantum computing for the general public. Quantum computing is going to unleash things like artificial general intelligence, although that'll probably come before that. But what quantum computing will really release is artificial super intelligence. We have a lot of work to do before we get there. And we have a lot of constitutions around AI we need to write and like making sure that it can govern itself. I'm not glossing over those things. I'm highly aware. But for me, it's the societal impact, the understanding of gender and sexual attraction, being able to explain that and inform the public in a way that has never been done before, where we are not a binary as a human race. We come in all different shapes, sizes, builds, makeups, and that just as our hair color and eye color are different, or when you turn gray, all of that also plays into your gender and your sexual attraction, and they're just not binary. And so I just have this dream where I feel like these, along with environmental impacts, curing cancer, etc., I feel like that type of technology can help us do a better job at forming a better society. That's like the dystopian kind of vision of like what I would love to see. I recognize there can also be a lot of harms in that. It could be used the complete opposite way, especially depending on what governments become powerful in the world, what have you. It could have a lot of effects. But in my mind, a dystopian, I really hope that it goes there. And kind of thinking about the way that companies have governed, like, okay, we don't like what you're doing. We're going to come over here and do this. And that is a way that society we're governing ourselves and kind of shifting and moving the landscape. I'd love a society where this is really important, where transgender and non-binary our transgender and non-binary community and society overall are educated about the spectrum of gender from an early age and are able to make the best choices themselves with their parents and their support of their doctors and research and all of that to be able to support themselves. That's a portion of our community that is struggling immensely right now in what is a very personal decision. Very, very personal decision. And so many friends that have gone through that process or that I've been a part of that process with them, I have so much admiration for them. And I also am just struck by the fact that if we as a society did a better job of being inclusive, using technologies, hopefully these newer technologies like I mentioned, what could they be doing? What changes or impacts on society would they have that would better society, better our human race, if they weren't spent having to focus on hiding themselves, on not being themselves, spending years and years of clearly torture, just trying to figure out how to navigate the world. If they didn't have to do that, what positive impact could they have on the world? Would we already have artificial general intelligence? Because some of our best and brightest minds were from the LGBTQ community. And I think it's important not to forget that.
yeah, that's fair. Maybe on a podcast episode, maybe in conversation, but it was the question came out like, what if homophobia and like transphobia didn't exist? Right? Like what if all everyone who fits under these communities after that, racism, sexism, all of that, like what if that just didn't exist and people were able to like not waste time trying to counter the effects of this or having to deal with the effects of it, but just able to just be and, what could we create? What could we build if we didn't have to think about whether we could use a certain bathroom or will my doctor understand my work? Will my doctor understand me and treat me the same way? How could society be better? Huh.
Yeah.
And then I guess one more question about this, and then we can move to the second part, even though I think you might have touched on it. But when you think about where LGBT tech is now, what's one or two things you would love to be doing in the future, like to see the organization? Where do you want to see the organization grow?
I really want to be moving internationally. And this really centers around the fact that the United States is not necessarily the center of technology policy anymore as it once was. And I think it's important to recognize that, whether the listener likes it or not, it is the truth. And I think that's important for ensuring that we're thinking about different perspectives. GDPR, which governs privacy in the UK, is extremely important because, thinking and in conversations I've had with academics and professionals, like think about what they went through in World War II. Privacy and security are extremely important to them, and that informs some of those laws. It's not the same way we faced it here in the United States, the physical United States. I know that we had hundreds of thousands of service individuals that lost their lives there, but I think it's important to recognize that that global perspective, or like South Korea or Australia or Canada or Brazil, all places that we have published information in on encryption and talked about privacy and security, it's extremely important to have that global perspective. So for me, international work is some of the most important that LGBT tech can be doing going forward. In addition, is the research components of that. They go hand in hand. One cannot exist without the other. You cannot advocate on behalf of communities without understanding them and listening to them, most importantly. So those two go hand in hand.
Okay.
There's a model of this goes a little bit further fetched of just of around nonprofits and around sustainable nonprofits. It's something that from the formation of LGBT tech, have always really strived for. This is also not the only nonprofit that I've founded. I founded the Shenandoah LGBTQ Center in Stanton, Virginia, or in the Shenandoah Valley. And I recognize the stark difference of regional or local nonprofits to national or international nonprofits. And I think we need to do a better job. I think it involves data. I think it involves AI. I think it involves becoming experts in these fields to be able to do a better job. But that is an area that I'd like to see really expanded and really work on as an organization, but also in helping other organizations do the same thing and figuring out that model that works best.
Okay. I love that. I love that. Because I do think there's a lot of like technology is a tool and there's a lot of uses for it. And the thing I appreciate too about nonprofits, it's like you have a mission that is usually not technology focused. You're on the front lines helping actual people in communities who need it.
Mhm.
So sometimes what I imagine a challenge is I'm too busy helping these people to like learn how to use technology to help the people better. And they just, they have limited resources, limited time, limited energy to be able to do that. So
Mhm.
thinking of ways to help make nonprofits more sustainable, help make their missions better. Because even these days, certain nonprofits who have very niche audiences or niche missions easily fall under what people are calling DEI, and people are not wanting to fund. People are not wanting to sponsor. Companies are like, hey, we might still give you some money, but we're doing this anonymously.
Mhm.
We don't want other people to see what we're doing because then we may be caught up in something. Yeah, yeah. I think those are the places that I really feel for these days. It's there are the big ones and the small ones. They're the Trevor projects who are like, hey, Congress wants to take away this suicide crisis hotline because they don't what? It's like,
Yeah.
well, why? Or just other groups who do a lot of HIV work or other things that are connected and around our communities. They are targets, or at least
Mhm.
the first targets. And it's really hard to say how to how do we all support? Like, how do we keep supporting these organizations? Because it's not like if they stop, the problems that they were solving are gone away, right? If there's no suicide crisis hotline, it's not like people still don't want to talk to someone.
And like 988, it was Chairman Pai who was appointed by Trump. He's the one that initiated that. We had a great relationship with Chairman Pai. In fact, we worked on 988 behind the scenes, making sure that there was LGBT, coordinating with Trevor Project. So I think it's also important to recognize that there are a lot of good people out there who understand the importance of this, regardless of their, political affiliation, what have you. Like, I think it's really about listening to people and recognizing that their lived experience and the way they're coming to the table may be good. I'm not saying not everybody's good, not everybody has good intentions. There are a lot of people out there with good intentions. There are a lot of people who see the struggles, and I think it's important not to discount them.
Yeah. And I hope there are ways that we get to collectively empower them to help the people who are standing up and able to push back and resist. And if we have the research and we have the data and we have the people and the stories, in theory, that means we should have the win. We should be able to make progress and move forward there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, and I'm glad of what your organization is doing and looking forward to some of the products you're putting out and some of these programs. And
yeah,
the next time we can collaborate.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And please, feel free to check out lgbttech.org. That takes you to all of our other websites. We're working on things, like I said, cybersecurity guidebook, and cybersecurity is really important to our community. That should be out shortly. We're also preserving information and research around the community that has been done at the federal level. And so that will be a project coming out, and you'll be able to find that on our website here really shortly. But that's going to be the LGBTQ archive that really documents, I think, over 4,000 documents or bodies of research and information that pertain to the LGBTQ community. So a couple areas that we work in, a lot of them we can't talk about in how we work in under NDAs and stuff, but I can tell you that each and every day we're making sure the voice of the community is heard, making sure that we are incorporating the research we've done, incorporating the research from our programs, the voices from communities, and making sure that products, systems, and the things that we rely on each and every day include our community. So, thank you so much for having me today.
there's part of me that's on the fence about some of that, where it's like we're doing things behind the scenes and it's like, oh, but at least you're there, but you wish there could be more, but that's the way we are today. Because yeah, like even I was talking to some people here in DC who are with Pride, and they're like a number of sponsors dropped out, and then a couple sponsors said, just keep us anonymous, right? We'll still give, but we'll give. And like that's a reality that we live with, and that's okay-ish for now. But I think it's yeah, we have to be wise in 2025.
It's not where we want to be, most certainly. We don't want to be hiding or going back in the closet or having companies or supportive organizations hide in the closet. I think it is important to recognize the time we're in and the importance of honoring some of those pieces when companies or organizations come to us and say, hey, can we just remain anonymous? Because they're trying to preserve, right now, they're trying to figure out the same landscape we've been under for the last 100 days, which has been chaos
Yeah.
and navigate that. And so a little grace is okay for right now and trying to make sure we're navigating this right.
Okay. So with that, we'll move to the next part of the podcast, and I have two specific questions. So the first one, just mentioning Pride. I'm here in DC, and we have World Pride starting pretty soon, middle of May into June. So I've been asking all guests, when you think of Pride, so this is both the experience, the feeling, the event, what comes to mind for you?
For me, Pride has always been about creating a space where the entire LGBTQ community can come out and be who they are and who they most feel like in a space that's welcoming and inclusive, in a space that sees each other and provides space for each other. That has always been what it's been about for me. From the early days of working for the Blade and being part of some of my first prides, the understanding, depth, and perception of the community that I was able to gather from that of us of the community coming together, the lessons I learned about the community, the history I learned were so important. And it was a lot of it was through Pride. And so it brings together the community in a way that I think is extremely powerful, that needs to be celebrated, that should be fiercely fought for in all regards. And so, that's what pride means for me and what it's meant to me, in my 40-year-old life.
Nice, nice. And yeah, yeah. And that's one of the most exciting parts about this upcoming World Pride for me. Take it. It's a mix. So the big weekends, I'm trying to mentally prepare for that, emotionally, restfully, hydrating beforehand. But the events that I love the most are like the ones that happen during the week. And it's like Latin Pride, Silver Pride, Youth Pride, Trans Pride, and like all the smaller groups as they celebrate in community and like truly center each type of group. They tend to not always be the most attended, but it's in between because then you're able to like have more conversations with the people and people feel that the love in the community without all of the crowds and lines that some of the bigger events will have. But
I
yeah,
mean, that's where I got some of my best education. It's not the big ones are fine. Those are really big and there's a lot there. But going to prides that were very specific or different community events is where I learned the most, and if you are passionate about learning and understanding and and educating yourself, there is no better place to go to than some of those spaces, respectfully, and make sure that you're welcome. But because sometimes those spaces are meant for those individuals to come together so that they can have that moment of in time. So just make sure you're welcome. But I have learned so much from people in those spaces, and so much lived experience comes into those spaces, and that's just knowledge that you can't replace.
no. Yeah, looking forward to it and it'll be here sooner than you know. And now, so question I ask every guest, um, it's 2025 and we're all part of the LGBTQ plus community. So what is a vision that you have for the next step that you would like to see for us, with us, and around us?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier. My dream in this world and beyond is to have a world and society where gender and sexual attraction are not binary and that it's understood that way and it's taught that way, where an LGBTQ person doesn't have to feel any sort of shame or pain or hurt in relation to their sexual orientation or gender identity. I think that's ultimately what I want to see. It's a tall order, but I'm hopeful. I'm maybe not in my lifetime, but I'm hopeful as a society. I've said this before, people kind of give me weird looks. I feel like until we discover another form of life that is as intelligent as we are, or more intelligent than we are, that is a threat to us, it's not until then that we will stop that we won't stop fighting in and amongst ourselves as a society and as a human race. I mean that you look at history, you look at everything and where we've been, and so I hope that happens soon, and I hope we stop fighting amongst each other because at the end of the day, we are all beautiful. We all have we're amazing creatures in where we've come from, what we've been able to develop when you think about it in the universe, and we could be doing so much more if we just stopped infighting. It just drives me crazy. So That's my hope for the future. I know it's big, but I have to stay there, especially in times like now. It's important to remember that dream and vision.
Nice. That's nice. I love that. Sometimes I have this weird dream or idea of like I want to find like sports and then like a non-athletic equivalent. And then as a society, we can choose our teams. And then, instead of like arguing about rights and healthcare and education, we'll be like, I'm going for the Lakers and you're going for the other team. And I can have that internal conflict, but at the end of the season, okay, whatever. We won, we lost. Instead of being like putting people's dignity and humanity on the line every election because of how we're feeling about different things. Like I
Yeah.
would like to have just, something else that is low stakes, but still helps you feel human and excited and scared and happy and sad and all that good stuff. But everyone still is living lives where they thrive.
Exactly. Exactly. As their authentic selves. I actually wrote that down that like especially in our community, sometimes I feel like we're expected to contort into some predetermined box of what how we should show up as a gay man, as a lesbian, as a transgender person, as a non-binary person, as a queer person. And I would also love to see within our community, I would love to see that go away. Like you just show up as you are. You show, you come to the table with what makes you most comfortable, most authentic because that's your lived experience. That's how you see the world. And as long as it's not hurting somebody else, then it's who you are and you should be able to show up in that way, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I think of like someone who's wearing a suit that they don't like, that doesn't really fit, but they think they have to wear a suit because like I'm at a place. And how sometimes someone else's discomfort can rub off. And it's like, oh, that person wasn't confident in what they were saying because, yes, all the words are right, but they didn't look it. But I think like if we were fully ourselves and were able to tap into that all the time, like it's sort of the best part about pride. There's certain aspects where you see someone who's just like so themselves, like
Hmm.
so just like bam, and you're just like, wow, that is that what freedom is? Is that what life could be? And it's not like those people never really make you feel bad. It's like, oh, they're having so much fun. I want to have fun, right? I want to enjoy versus, yeah, versus some of the
Yeah.
other people who are like, hey, we all need to be in a suit. How dare you not do this thing? Like, yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It's the future that we're creating, and it's we're creating it like one day at a time. This pride may all of us show up as authentically ourselves, and then keep that with us as we keep moving forward. Okay,
Completely agree.
have a couple rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Hmm.
Okay. Question one. What is something that inspires you and why?
I know this sounds cliche. My family, my husband, who has lived a life for sure in multiple journeys, but his sheer determination and will is incredible through everything that he's been through. And also my kids, we're foster to adopt parents, or we're all of our boys are adopted, and I never thought I would be a dad based on growing up as a gay man. My husband changed my perspective on that, but it's the best decision that I made. Watching the world through a child's eyes is amazing. Watching the world through the eyes of a child who doesn't have, similar blinders that I had on or societal pressures that I had on is also amazing. And being able to see the way they approach society with compassion and love and care, and also like what is societal constructs within normative situations, and what is actual human fundamental biological constructs has been really really powerful. But they are inspirational in what and drive me to be a better person every day.
Nice, nice. And thing I like about that question, and even when someone says, "Oh, this sounds just so cliche," I'm like, "That's pretty good." Right? If you're gonna be around these people most of the time, a lot of the time, right? If they can inspire you, how much more inspired will you be?
Hmm. Oh, they challenge me. I mean, that's the thing. It's not the inspiration is great, but they will challenge you. They will push your buttons, and that's where learning happens. That's where real change happens is when you're faced with a new situation or an unknown or a hard situation. Like that's where real change happens, and that's why they inspire me. They push me in ways that it's hard for other people to push me.
It's that it's something that inspires you and also challenges you. Interesting. So I'm like, oh, maybe that's a different way to ask that question. But and again, so next question. What is your favorite self-care routine or activity?
So I know most people would be like the gym, and all that. And all those things are important. Gym, like working out, all that stuff, all super important. For me, sometimes it's about sitting around a lot of people with headphones on and just watching the world go by. Spending time in my own head, spending time thinking about the information I've gathered, processing what went right, more importantly, what went wrong, how could I do better, all while being surrounded by, I do this on the train, I do this on planes and airports. If you ever come across me and I'm like spaced off and, with headphones on, now you know what I'm doing. It's just my time to think and process. And I don't think, I think the world has become so chaotic and so covered with technology, this and this phone that never leaves you, and like all this that we forget to take time to process and think in our own head and take time to really work on ourselves and take time to address the issues or challenges that we've faced and own our part of those and recognize what parts of those are not. I think it's led to a lot of the mental health crisis that we're dealing with. I think we've in some capacity, lost the ability to self-soothe, which is a basic fundamental milestone that a baby has to hit in order to move to the next level. Bringing out my foster care education here, but it's true. I look at some adults and I'm like, this is crazy. Like we're so wrapped up in everything that's going on around us that we forget to take care of ourselves. And if we can't take care of ourselves and we can't, as RuPaul says, can't love ourselves, how the hell are we going to love anybody else? If you can't take care of yourself, how in the hell are you going to take care of anybody else as well? Like, there's just no way. And so you got to take care of this and you and make sure that you're challenging yourself because no one's going to do it as hard, as powerful, and as great as you will.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Especially that last part. Make sure that you're challenging yourself. Yeah. I get to think about that later in my self-care time. All right, a couple more questions. So, do you have a favorite joke?
I am continuously hit with jokes of my oldest son. So this is one that he recently told me. Why don't skeletons fight each other?
I don't know.
They don't have the guts.
Nice, nice, nice.
There's a queer one that I heard. I'm just not sure how I feel about it. Like I'm inundated. I don't have a favorite because I'm inundated all the time. Like my son has so many joke books. It's like half of his shelves. And he's also an avid reader. There was another one that I heard, not from him, but from somebody else that was like, why did the non-binary prospector head west?
I don't know. I don't know.
They heard there was gold in their hills.
Wait, they heard there was gold in their hills.
There.
They,
THDIR.
oh, their hills. Okay.
I mean, you know.
It's fair. It's fair.
I went that, like I said, I heard it and I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But if you're not paying attention, you're like, okay, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Love it.
I told you, dad jokes.
I know those are the best jokes because I have no kids, but I have a collective like 10 or 11 nieces and nephews. So
Oh, so you know.
you need to have stuff in the back pocket that you can just say and throw out and watch them not get it and then get it and then be really upset that they got it and then like, yeah, I did that. And then I can walk away and go eat some food or something.
I love it. I love it.
Oh, all right. Okay, what's next? All right. So, who is a queer change maker that inspires you?
Sorry, I'm trying to think where to go with this. I have like a whole catalog of these. I think I'm gonna say somebody, you know what? This is why it's so difficult. It's because it's continuously evolving because I'm constantly learning. So like, when Tim Cook came out, I found it very powerful and the fact that there was somebody at that level that came out, and is publicly out. When I learned about Martine Rothblatt and her journey and what she went through in creating all this and like kind of the science nerdy side of me came out of like, oh, this is really cool and this is what they did. And then they're also part of our community and they just moved with that and they're like, no, this is who I am and I'm gonna keep going. I found that so powerful and amazing. But there's also like EC, who used to run Trans Tech Social, former executive director of Trans Tech Social, amazing guy and just so much thought and passion and love and drive across the board and also just showing up for people and showing up and showing out for people, making sure that you're there has been really really incredible. So that was kind of last year. Most recently we attended the ball here in New York, one of the balls here in New York.
Mhm.
And so what I would say is not so much a person but a community that is that's a big part of our LGBTQ community would be the ball community. And I know it has a long history, but I've definitely seen a revival. But what's really powerful in there is the family, the camaraderie, the chosen family, the camaraderie, the support, the tough love, from those mothers and fathers who will, you know, put their children in their place, as they say. But that is community. Like that is solid community that is there through thick and thin, who has so much. And it's been such an inspiration to me to see and have the privilege to be exposed to and part of and see up close and personal. So I think that's probably my most recent inspiration.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. At some point, I see myself putting these online in a way and having like the wall of change make like wall of who inspires people and just who and why. Because I think there's a lot of us out there. And the more conversations we're in, the more communities we're in, we start seeing them more and more. And like, oh, this person. And like, from this small little organization you probably never heard of because they work in one little part of the country or world, but like they are inspiring me because they're able to do so much with what they have and make that impact and show up. And yeah, so I love asking that question. You gave me like four different names or four different answers, and I definitely appreciate that.
I love what you just said, and it reminds me of Dr. Jameis Shelton, who used to work for the True Colors Fund, Cyndi Lauper's organization. I'm not quite sure where she's at now. I have to double check. But I remember her, I was so fearful to tell my story about leaving, being kicked out of my home, that I just didn't. And fearful in the fact that I realized that so many other LGBTQ individuals had it so much worse. Either they were in the closet for a long time, they were completely kicked out, disowned, had no support, like, and no communication to this day. So I really hid that and I didn't talk about it. Also recognizing, educating myself and realizing what privilege that I showed up with in some of these spaces. And she looked at me at one point and said, you never know who's listening. And so it's important to tell your story because you don't know how it's going to impact them. It's not about taking up room or space in the room. It's about telling your story authentically because you never know who's listening. You never know how that may impact them. And that was really powerful for me. It gave me the permission to talk carefully, gave me permission when appropriate, and make sure that I was adding to the conversation. But it's so important to tell your story regardless of what it is because you never know who's listening. And I think that's a crucial part of this podcast and why I was excited to do it. Because you never know who's listening.
Not that piece of advice. And that actually takes me to my final question, which is, do you have a piece of advice or guiding word of wisdom that two parts that you would like to share with others and or one that has been helpful for you in your own journey in your life?
So I am all about core values.
Mhm.
Everything, goal setting, core values, all this stuff. So core values have been a really big journey for me, and I challenge them all the time. And I have for a very long time. And so I have two core values that I live by, which you've maybe heard versions of them before, but I've never heard some of them in these ways. One is leave it better than you found it. And it could be a person, place, or thing. And leaving it better than you found it doesn't mean it's always left positive. And I think that's the part that most people forget is that even if you go through a challenging time or, a friendship ends or whatever, you don't know you know what's going to happen for you and you know how you process that. You don't know how they process that and where they're going to end up. And so as long as you're not hurting somebody, it's sometimes important to recognize that even though it didn't end well or didn't, break off well or whatever the situation was, that it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you led with integrity and you tried to leave it better than it or them better than you found it. So we've all heard that, kind of in one way, but I think that's that second part that most people are like, oh, this is awful and it's not going to be great. And it's like, no, you got to really think through. Maybe it is best in the end. The second thing is plant trees under which you will never sit. And that is about the butterfly effect. That is about doing things without recognition, lifting those up around you. Look, I'm a Leo. I'm a Leo through and through. And if anybody follows those signs, they'd be like, okay, center of attention. Well, I don't identify with those. And I've wrestled with this because I can take center stage. That's fine. I can do that and it doesn't bother me. It's not my favorite place though. It's really, I really like doing things when no one knows about it, doing things that will have an effect down the road, like, that will have an impact in a way that others may never know. And I think that one of the really powerful things for me, Schindler's List, which is not something a lot of people talk about. Schindler's List. So Schindler in 1980s or something like that was brought into I think an auditorium, 70s or 80s, brought into an auditorium. And what he didn't realize that sitting all around him were all the people that he had saved in wartime Germany. And for me, he never expected that type of accolade or never expected that. But I think my point of that is that when you do something so great and you do something that it really impacts people, it will come back to you. It may not be in a public way, it may not be in a big way, but planting trees under which you'll never sit will leave the world a better place. And the world will see that. And it will provide for you in the way that you need it. Not necessarily the way you want, but the way you need it when you need it, as long as you're living by those some core values.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for both of those. And I can understand how they both fit and even see different ways where easy to say, a little harder in practice to, to really leave something and realizing positive or negative doesn't really mean good or bad. It's just a spectrum of experience. And yeah, I love the planting trees because I think sometimes you don't know whether it comes to like even sharing your story, right? I shared my story with people in the audience and they may follow me on a social thing, or I may never see them again, or the next time I see them, they might be like, "Hey, I heard your story this one time and it put me on this new path."
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah,
your responsibility, your opportunity to, you know what, I'm gonna share this, and that's all I can do. The rest is on the universe, God, spirit.
I think a huge one of the biggest kind of aha moments in that space and what kind of helped me come to that thought was I gave a commencement speech at a community college, and I, for the first time, openly talked about the fact that I'm neurodivergent, that I'm ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 30. I had to like reteach myself how to work. It was an awful process. But I had a mom come up to me and was like, "You gave me so much hope for my child who's had ADHD all their life and like it did a lot of the things that you expressed in your commencement speech." And she's like, I just thank you. And so yeah, I did, again, planting a tree under which I did sit, but it's those moments of like those few moments that you're talking about of like that you do hear it and you have no idea how many others you planted that you'll never know is important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you,
the time
Justin.
out of this conversation to be on this podcast, share a lot of your journey and what you and LGBT tech are up to. I look forward to the rest of this 2025 year and to see where your organization goes and grows. And we'll definitely have links to the different programs and stuff in the show notes.
So
Yeah,
sounds great.
that we can.
Thank you so much, Justin. This is great. This is such an important thing for our community. And so thank you for your efforts and thank you for your time that you put behind this because it is important. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Queer Changemakers. This is Justin, and I hope you are able to get some inspiration and maybe some ideas about how you can take action to create positive change in your life, communities, and beyond. See you next time.